want to start preparing your mochi 2 hours in advance, and I have my cupcake runners, and my recipe is for 4 mochi, but if you want to double or triple that, you can do that too. And then I'm using strawberry ice cream, but obviously you can use any ice cream that you want. And I have my ice cream scooper to get me really perfect mochi balls. And then you want to use a spoon to kind of pack in the ice cream. And this is so that you don't have any holes in there. So then what you're going to do is take a knife, a butter knife would be fine too, but just scrape off the end so that you have a perfect flat surface. And this will make it a lot easier when you're rolling your mochi. Then just scoop out your ice cream, and then you should have a perfect ball like this. Now you want to put this in the freezer for 2 hours, and a lot of you ask me, why do I need to put it in the freezer when it's already frozen? The reason is because once you shape the ice cream, as you can see, it's really soft on the edges. It's even already starting to melt after a couple minutes. So after you put it in the freezer, it'll be rock solid. If you do skip this step, your mochi will melt most likely, and it'll be really messy. So definitely don't skip this step, just prepare 2 hours in advance. So this is my Chico. This is what I used for my mochi. So it's called sweet rice flour. Another name for that is glutinous rice flour. You can use glutinous rice flour, but I just definitely recommend the Mochico. I think it would give you a better texture and taste. But if you don't have that, then glutinous rice flour is okay. Alright, so I'm going to turn on the stove to a really low heat. Now I'm going to add my milk, and I'm using whole milk, but any milk is fine. I've used almond before. And then you want to add your sugar. And then you're just going to mix this until the sugar is dissolved. Then you're going to turn off the heat, add oil for moisture, and I'm using vegetable oil, but I've used coconut oil in the past. Anything that has a neutral taste will be fine. And you definitely need this oil because if you don't add it, then your mochi dough is going to stick to the pan. And I'm also using a non-stick pan, which is best, but if you don't have that, it's okay. It's just going to be really sticky. This part is optional, but I'm going to add some red food coloring because I want a pink color. And this is vanilla extract. This will just give it a really nice flavor. You could also substitute green tea if you want a green tea flavor, or even cocoa powder if you want chocolate. I've also tried coffee. Everything works. So just mix everything together. Now I'm going to gradually add the Mochico rice flour. Don't add everything together because you don't want it clumpy. Just do this gradually. Okay, so now once that's nice and smooth with no clumps, we're going to turn the heat back on to a medium-low, and then you're going to continue stirring this. Make sure you stir the entire time. You don't want any clumps. Try to get the edges too. So it is starting to get a bit thicker. Just keep on stirring. So you can see it's starting to clump up. That's totally normal. Just keep on stirring and everything's going to come together. And once it starts to get really thick like this, that's when I like to switch over to my spatula. So I'm just going to clean this off, and this will make things a lot easier to mix. So again, it's starting to really clumpy, but trust me, everything will come together. Just keep on stirring. So as I mix, I kind of like to flatten everything out, scrape the pan, and then bring everything back to the middle, and just keep on doing this because you want everything to cook evenly. Don't forget the sides. You don't want those to burn. Okay, so I think it's almost done. You can see everything is sticking together pretty well. So how I like to test to see if it's ready is you can just press down with your spatula and then pick your dough up. And as you can see, it's sticking pretty well. So that's how I know it's done. You want to make sure you get the texture right. You don't want it too thin, you don't want it too thick. This is the perfect texture you want. Alright, so now you're going to turn the heat off. I have a cutting board and some starch right here. I recommend potato starch, but cornstarch is fine too. Potato starch will just give you a lot better texture. Now you want to sprinkle your starch on. You don't need to sift it, but I like to do this because I think it just adds everything evenly rather than just putting it on yourself. And then you also want to dust your hands with the starch as well so that it's not sticky to your hands. Now you're going to add your dough. And it is hot, so just be careful. If it's too sticky, then you can just add more starch too. So you don't want to add too much starch, but you don't want to add too little. And now you're going to flatten this and also flip it upside down. Do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to try to make a square shape because we're going to cut this into 4 even pieces later. Now you want to grab your plastic wrap and you're going to cover this so it doesn't dry out in the fridge and put this in the fridge for 20 minutes so that the dough can cool down. So if you don't do this and your dough is not cool, then the ice cream is just going to melt immediately and it's going to be a mess when you roll the mochi. Okay, so my mochi dough is pretty cold now. Just make sure you check it. If it's still warm, put it back in the fridge. So what I'm going to do now is just brush off this excess starch. And I have a side of water and starch. So the starch is so it's not sticky, and the water is for when I want it to stick. So now I'm going to use a knife and just brush this with some starch so that I can cut it easily. So you're going to cut this into 4 pieces. Brush off your starch. So I think this side looks nicer, so I'm going to make this the outside and this the inside. So I have my ice cream, and I only took out 1 at a time, the rest in the freezer because they melt really quickly. So put this in the middle, and I see that there's a kind of a hole right here, so I'm going to add some water, make sure this is really sticky, and now it'll stick together. So bring all your edges together, you can pinch it shut. Try to do this as fast as you can so the ice cream doesn't melt, and then to make everything stick, just add a little bit of water and dab it, and then I'll make everything sticky again. So you can kind of smooth everything out with your hands. If it's too sticky, add some starch. If you want it to stick, add some water. And it doesn't need to look perfect on the bottom, no one's even gonna see this. Then what I'm going to do is put this back in the wrapper and then put this in the freezer to firm up. So this is optional, but I just like to dust a little bit more starch on top just to make it look a little nicer. I think powdered sugar would also be fine, but it will melt if it's wet.